to the Midwifery Folklorist, Oral Archive, and Lunar Gathering Space. I'm your host and priestess, Midwife Okunchola Amadou. This is a living archive of birth mysteries and midwifery wisdom, and together we're gathering every new and full moon around the globe. Welcome. As we hear the birds, the moans of the frogs in the water around us, the creaking of the old wise trees with the sea moss hanging and swinging in the early morning breeze, as the birds make their spirits and hearts heard through their songs, the scent of frankincense and myrrh and sage wafts around me. I'm sitting in front of water, and a bit of a marsh, a grass field, in the Lowcountry of St. Helena Island. We gather under the blood full moon's light as it recedes and make light for the sun. We gather under the shadow of the solar eclipse, aligning ourselves with the wisdom of the waters, the wisdom of the womb, and the wisdom of those who came before us. This is a moment of restoration, remembrance, and reclaiming the midwife's path. First, before I go any further, I must acknowledge the ancestor spirits here and the very ancestor that brought me to the Lowcountry. I'm acknowledging the ancestors of the Gullah Geechee Island land and Laura Carr spirit. Before we enter the stories, we honor those who paved the way. We honor the midwives whose names we know and those whose names have been whispered on the wind. This very early morning between night and day, we sit in remembrance of Laura Carr, a Black Grand ancestral midwife of the Gullah Geechee Lowcountry. Her hands, her voice, her legacy are with us now. As we move through time, we will not rush. We exist in the time-space of the cosmic universe, the cosmic heavens, what modern time people will call polychronic time versus monochronic time, meaning polychronic time being that I am more concerned or engaged intentionally with the deepness around the depth of communication and what I am experiencing in this moment, instead of forcing it into a linear time frame of production, of getting something done at a certain time, by a certain time, no matter if it is fruitful or enjoyable or what have you. Many African and indigenous and Asian and Australian countries exist on polychronic time, and here we do the same. So we will flow in the rhythm of the moon, the tides, the womb, and the ancestors. And now we'll open our space officially with an invocation prayer, further honoring the primordial mothers, ancestral mothers, and the midwives and way openers of today. To our primordial ones, the original spirits, the breath of the cosmic heavens, the Ayami is what we will call you in Yoruba. Our Orisha mothers is what we will call you in Yoruba. We know you to be the elemental forces that move throughout our body in the sacred spaces of who we are, throughout the water in our womb, throughout the blood that flows through our body that mimics the seas and the waters of the earth. We thank you. You who breathed the first waters of life into the great womb of creation. You who wove the first red thread shaping worlds, shaping destinies. You who knew the mysteries of birth before time began. Giving thanks to you, Yemoya, Oshun, Oya, Olokun, the great mothers of the waters, blood, and wind. Bless this gathering. The womb. We call forth the ancestral midwives, the grand birth keepers, the untamed ones. I can only imagine. Those who walked before us, catching life in their hands, whispering prayers over laboring mothers. Those who carried the plants from the earth, the secrets, the rituals, the songs. Those who were erased, outlawed, yet never truly silenced. Mothers, we see you. We honor you. We return to your ways. And to the midwives, the birth priestesses and way openers of today, you who hear the call, you who remember, I'm talking to you. You who are restoring, reclaiming, and resurrecting the sacred path of birth. May you be guided, protected, and strengthened. May the ancient ones walk with you. May the unborn hear your voice and know they are safe in your hands. We ask in this space, dear gracious divine creator, who I will call the Holy Odu. We ask for divine wisdom. We ask for ancestral alignment. We ask for protection as we walk this path. May we honor the cycles. May we return birth to its rightful place. Ashe. Welcome to the Midwifery Folklorist Oral Archive and Lunar Gathering Space, a sacred, silical meeting of remembrance, storytelling of our midwives, and ancestral wisdom. This is not a podcast. This is a living archive, a spiritual restoration of the voices, traditions, and teachings of folk midwives and birth priestesses and ancestral, cultural, spiritual birth workers across time and space. Here at the Midwifery Folklorist Oral Archive and Lunar Gathering Space, we do not just discuss, we remember. We do not just listen, we invoke. We do not just reclaim, we restore for the continuation of our lineage and our practices to continue to flow through time and space outside of us. Reclaiming is acknowledging. Restoring is creating ways to erect and solidify our practices so they'll never be gone again. So here at the Oral Archive and Lunar Gathering Space, each gathering takes place under the rhythms of the new and full moon. So it won't be like every Tuesday, every Thursday, every Saturday at this time. No, it will be whatever day the moon is 100% full, or the moon is 0% at new moon, we will meet on that day at 4 a.m. And at the beginning and end of every oral archive, I will remind you of when we will meet again. So before we get into it, I'm loving this smell of, I have frankincense and myrrh and white sage, and it smells so good. I hope you all are enjoying the sounds of the birds and the other sacred animals of this land. I can't wait to tell you about this land that I'm here sitting on. I'm getting there. What you'll experience here at the Oral Archive and Lunar Gathering Space, you'll experience oral herstories of Grand Midwives. So today, which we'll get into the energy of today, is our very first oral archive. So this is entry number 1. And what a gift it would be if you actually hear it on the day that this has taken place. So in hearing the oral herstories of grand ancestral midwives and grand midwives who are still here, we'll be unearthing their untold stories. Also, what you can expect to experience are primordial midwifery teachings and understandings and wisdom. We will explore the cosmic, spiritual, and nature-based origins of birthwork. Let me tell you something. We cannot act as if the cosmos and nature has nothing to do with us as humans. The way that the system vehemently rejects any discussion of the cosmos and nature in relation to spirituality and human condition, the rejection of it is just really, it's heart-wrenching, because they've placed the cosmic natural flow of things into a science category, something to be studied, something to be looked at, something to poke at. But any relation to how the cosmos and planets and star systems and nature around us, the elements, any relation to aligning that with our existence of humans, with our existence of how humans come through the portal to live on Earth, any connection to that is being dismissed as superstition, as evil, as something bad. It's powerful. It is who we are. We are nature. We are the cosmos. We cannot live without the elements. We are the elements. So I'm here to tell you, no matter what your religion is, no matter what your background is, that is a part of the problem in maternal health. That is a part of the problem within our Black diaspora communities, that we've been told to abandon things that we can't live without. That is the root of a lot of the chaos and crises, because we're living without something that we truly cannot live without. So thus it kills us. We're here in this space, the Oral Archive and Lunar Gathering Space, to reclaim and restore our nature-based cosmic principles, and to remove the stigma, the stereotype, the hoo-hoo around what that is. We're also here to discuss cultural and ancestral birthwork practices, honoring rituals, ceremonies, and indigenous wisdom that were erased yet live on in our bones, in our blood. We are here to honor as well the present and future of what cultural and spiritual midwifery looks like, which are the 2 new inventive pathways that I've created to honor our indigenous pre-colonial midwifery practices that have been almost wiped out because it's been forced to convert. And so right now we're practicing a blended form of colonial midwifery with some of our indigenous practices, which is traditional midwifery. So these new pathways stand at the crux of time to bring back what is truly ours. And that is the folk midwife and birth priestess pathways. So ultimately, this is a space to reconnect with the ancestors, the elements, and the sacred work of birth that was never meant to be lost. And who am I? I am Okunchola Amadou, the midwifery folklorist, a preserver, a storyteller, a bridge between the past and the present. And I come from a long line of women who have carried wisdom in their hands, in their bones, in their voices. And I am here to uncover, uplift, and restore the sacred traditions of midwifery that have been stolen, erased, and buried under colonial structures. So through the Midwifery Folklorist, I hope you've been to the beautiful, lovely website that I've created for you all. Through the Midwifery Folklorist, I show up as a preserver of oral history and ancestral midwifery knowledge, a storyteller who weaves together the voices of grand midwives, healers, and birth priestesses, a cultural bridge between traditional birth work and spiritual reclamation, a guardian of folk midwifery, ensuring that it remains protected and honored. I'm lighting my purple candle. I do this work through research, oral archiving, ancestral storytelling, and spiritual midwifery education. I do this sacred work, and I'll be honest, I'm going to find another word besides work by the time we speak again. But I do this work so that our grandmother's hands may never be forgotten. You know, I know we all have memories of our grandmothers and what they did with their hands. You got a headache, baby? Let me come and place my hands on the front and back of your head, your forehead and the back of your head, you know, or let me rub some oil on you, you know, or let me comb your hair. Let me bathe you. Let me make you something to eat. The hands of our grandmothers. So I do this work so that what they did through their hands to heal us, to restore us, to love on us, to bring us joy, to celebrate us, because who celebrates us? And so that and I do this so that those, you, who, you know, you're listening, and the ones that you will touch and pass the baton to, I do this so that you all that are called to this path may walk in your fullness. You deserve to walk in your fullness. I know what it feels like to only be given access to a midwifery path that is not full. To be given access to a path that says this is the only way for you to practice what you want to do. And it's about 20, 30% of what it really should be. And you're forced into this system, but you are wanting more. But how do you get it? So I'm here to make sure that you have access to the fullness of what midwifery originally was and what it was intended to be. And why do I do it? The truth is that this is my calling, this is my offering, and this is my return. So that is me, the Midwifery Folklorist. Now I want to get into the moon. And then we're going to talk about the land that we're on. We're going to honor the spirits of the land. I'm currently in the Gullah Geechee Lowcountry community in St. Helena Island. And I specifically let me honor the fact that currently I am on a Black Grand Ancestral spiritual midwifery ethnographic research journey across the coastal sea islands and communities. And I'm here in South Carolina, traveling across South Carolina and Georgia. And I started in Myrtle Beach, made my way to Hopcaw Barony, made my way through Georgetown, and then made my way through the Pine community and upwards to now St. Helena Island. I will then venture to from St. Helena Island over to Hilton Head Island. And from Hilton Head, I will venture into Dafuski and over to Savannah, Georgia. Now, currently, it is a blood full moon. And a blood moon is not just an eclipse. It is a celestial shift, a divine revelation, a crossing of worlds. It is the moment when the earth, the sun, and the moon align in sacred balance, yet the moon is bathed in deep red light of transformation. I am not only a Black woman, a mother, and a midwife, I'm also a priestess, an initiated priestess. And before I became a priestess, I was a conjurer and a root worker through the hoodoo lineage, and I still am. I will always be a hoodoo practitioner. And what I loved about practicing hoodoo before ever being initiated was that hoodoo teaches you how to honor both your earth and the ancestors. And so I am initiated into Ifa, the Orisha, and Voodoo Mami Wata. I walk the path and honor the Ayami. And in relation to the blood moon, and thinking about what it means for our culture, our Yoruba culture, in which the Ifa, Sheshe, Orisha lineage comes through, blood moon is a portal of ancestral awakening. It's a time when the veil is thin and the wisdom of the elders speak loudly. It's a moment of deep cosmic purification where old structures collapse. So yes, there are ancient stories from African societies and kingdoms that talk about the fear or the concern that when I'm taking a little walk, you can hear the leaves under my feet. But, there was this fear around the blood moon when the blood moon would come. Like, oh, there's a king that's about to fall. Oh, we may get attacked. There was always this concern around something bad happening. But what it is that things that no longer serve you are going to collapse. Fear that paralyzes your body is going to want to violently leave your body so you can be free. When we think about old systems collapsing, it's because they need to go. So think about this blood moon, right? They think of it like a bloodbath, like something is dying, something is being just tore up. You hear me? So think about the things in your life that have been harming you in a way, and this just needs to, and you know how it is. Your ancestors will say, you'll pray, oh, I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that, right? These are the things that we'll do. And the ancestors will tell you how to get it, give you a plan, tell you where to go. And what do we do as humans? Sometimes we'll keep holding on. We don't want to leave. We don't want to let it go. It's hard. So we keep going. We're stuck, frozen. So blood moons come to remind you that if you don't let go, these things will be forced to fall from you. So truths are unveiled at this time, and what no longer serves us must be released. So if you're feeling that, I don't know why. When I started to say that, I could see some people shaking their head like, oh my God, like you have no idea what I'm going through. Look, let it go. You know what this thing is. I'm going to give you some tips a little bit later on how to deal with this energy, but plan to let it go, because you know what? What's on the other side is something so beautiful for you. And you may not be able to see it because it's this thing that's holding on. And I'll give you a very brief example. I've always wanted to practice as a cultural, indigenous, sacred, spiritual midwife. And it's not that I wanted to, I was called to. That calling was revealed after I had 2 traumatic birthing experiences. And I was like, nah, there's got to be a better way. I didn't know how to find that better way, but with me being a book nerd and working at the library, I had access to unlimited resources through books and archives and all the CDs and all sorts of amazing things. And so with having access to that, I started to study ancient women, matriarchal civilizations, and I learned how they took care of each other. I learned how they welcomed life onto the planet. Now, y'all, this is back in 2007. We're in 2025. That was 18 years ago come April. Okay? So that's how long I've known and I've been immersed. Now, I didn't learn everything at once. When it first hit me, I was a bit afraid. I ain't gonna lie. I threw the book the first time I read about women's mysteries and all of the freedom they had. I was like, oh no, this is what they told me in Christianity to stay away from. Listen to me. I threw the blessed book over my balcony, y'all. I was like, no. I was a little faithful Christian. 2 days later, I walked out of my apartment door, looked over the balcony. The book was still there looking at me in the grass. I was expecting to make this man to pick it up, and he didn't. I got the book. I opened it up, and I have never been the same since then. So before religion, before system, before education, I learned the stories of women in alignment with the earth and with the planet. Now, that awakened me first to want to heal my wounds that came through patriarchy, through birth and domestic violence and things of that nature. So I healed those wounds. And through healing myself, it gave me vision. That's when my vision as a seer started to come to pass. And then I could see the wounds of other people. I was like, wow, people are out here bleeding and hurt, women. I worked at a daycare. And I was seeing their hurt and pain. And then they started to talk to me and tell me. And that's when I recognized that I had to hold a hand of a woman next to me, behind me, and bring her in front of me so she could walk through the healing portal too. So that's how it slowly started to evolve into, quote unquote, me being a healer. I know that's a little catchy term now. But nah, it was just, there was no titles for me. I was just doing the work. I organically started to practice as a doula. Why? Because I was holding space and supporting women, because I learned that there was a better way. And while we were still birthing in the system, we needed someone who knew. Now, along that journey of me wanting to align with those sacred women's practices and in ancient mysterious ways, I was told that if I wanted to do that for my community, I better go to school and get credentialed and certified. I refused. I rebelled. I went to Africa, and I stayed in Africa in Elmina, Ghana. I did a traditional birth attendant training with Grand Midwife Salama Sandra Abdullah, who is the oldest living Grand Midwife in America. I did her training, and then I stayed for 4 months studying with fetish priestesses in Cape Coast, Ghana, and working on the land. I did energy healing while I was there to make a little money while I was living, and I taught yoga on the beach, but I lived there. I even lived in a tent on the beach because I didn't have much money, but I refused to learn midwifery in America. So I stayed there, me and my 10-month-old baby. And then I came back to America like, yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready to keep going. I'm ready to keep going. I've studied, I've practiced. Before going to Africa, I was already in the community doing the work. But I felt like when I left from Africa, the blessings that I received from the elders, I was ready. And then I was kicked in the gut. I was told no. This is 2013. So imagine I started this path in 2007. So this is 2013. Within that time, I had trained as a Reiki healer, as a certified aromatherapist, as a registered yoga teacher. I went through a community herbalist training. I went through all of the things that I needed to do and completed those in 2010, all of the things that would help me better understand the earth in relationship to women and mothers. And then I culminated with completing my traditional midwifery training. And then I was told, nope, you can't do that. You need to get certified. So I refused to become a nurse. And so I went to midwifery school to become a certified professional midwife. And that is where I began to be suffocated and strangled. I can't say respectively because it's not. So these credentials were born on the backs of the erasures of midwives, like the Gullah Geechee midwives that we're going to talk about here. They were born on the backs of the erasure of indigenous midwives. And it is up to us to step into our power and to what this means for us. And the pathways that I've created allows us to do this in a safe, sacred, protected way. So, what does this mean for birth workers and those walking the sacred path of midwifery? It means that this is a time to cleanse, honor, and realign your birthwork practice with ancestral truth. It means that this is a moment to stand in your power as a guardian of birth, knowing that birth is a portal between worlds. It means that this is an opportunity to release fears and to claim your sacred responsibility and restore the divine order of birth. A blood moon does not come to be ignored. It comes to remind us of who we are. It is a sign of rebirth, a sign of reckoning, a sign of return. This is our time to restore birth to its rightful place. May we listen, may we act, may we rise. I also want to share why this matters for birth workers and midwives. Midwifery and birth work has always been tied to the moon. It's another reason why this oral archive gathers on the new and full moons. In ancient traditions, midwives, birth priestesses, and herbalists aligned their care with the lunar cycle. The new moon is a time of sacred stillness before the next wave of creation. It is the pause before birth. Concerning the new moon, which is a portal, the next one is, I'll share with you briefly, the new and full moon phases are not just one day. It's an energy of 7 days. So it's 3 days before the new or full moon and 3 days after, and the actual new or full moon day. So we have an Aquarius new moon coming up on March 25th. This will be considered a cosmic reset, a sacred pause, and an opportunity to realign our inner and outer worlds. New moons mark the beginning of a new cycle. This is a time for deep stillness, fasting, spiritual cleansing, and intention setting. And this Aquarius energy calls for radical renewal, release, and reconnection, both to self and community. This is a time to let go of the outdated and to step into divine alignment. So, how do you care for yourself during the new moon? And how do you prepare and get ready for the messages that will be released through this oral archive and around you? You can invite deep rest and reflection. Reduce distractions, any type of social noise. So reduce your social media interaction, technology interaction, and immerse yourself in nature how best you can. Reduce overstimulation. So if you can curate your work schedule around having a lighter workload around those windows of time. You may want to spend time in solitude, journaling, or having divination practices surround you at that time to receive new visions. It's not always about paying someone for a reading. There's other ways to divine. We'll continue to talk about that. You can also pay attention to your dreams and intuitive downloads. Something as simple as sleeping with a bowl of fresh spring water next to your bed that's been prayed over and blessed before sleeping. It's a cauldron, a holding for your dreams. You can also reset your cycles through fasting and light eating. around the new moon times. In many spiritual traditions, the 24 to 72 hours surrounding the new moon are a time to fast, cleanse, and reset the body. So drinking specific herbal teas, intaking coconut water to hydrate the body, or eating light water-based foods, fruits, soups, and greens will allow your system to harmonize with the lunar energy. If your body is really focused on processing and digesting heavy meats or dairy products, it impacts your ability to align with the moon energy. If you've ever heard of indigenous cultures that offer herbal ceremonies, spiritual ceremonies, they'll tell you to fast from animal products from 1 day all the way up to a week before partaking. Of course, if considering fasting, you want to consult yourself. Listen to your body's intuition, your spiritual guides, your elders. Listen to what your body needs. Other things that you can do to align with this energy: engaging in breath work and energetic clearing. Listen, this is not about paying someone to always do these things for you. This society is really based on, oh, let me pay a healer, No, you are your own healer. Most healers are there to activate your own healing response. It's not coming through them. They're a portal to activate what you already have. So with that being said, what you can do to get ready for this energy for the next new moon is you can take slow, intentional breaths to clear mental clutter and reset your nervous system. You can choose to burn herbs like what I did today: frankincense and myrrh, copal, sage, to cleanse stagnant energy. You can also wash your hands and feet with salt water to release energetic blockages. You can choose to use sound frequencies and waves to harmonize your spirit. I love to run a good bath of water and play binaural beats in an enclosed space to vibrate from the walls and through the water around my body. You can sing, hum, or chant affirmations to open the throat and heart chakra for renewal. And most importantly, you can set your new moon intentions with clarity. Write one clear intention for the next lunar cycle, one that aligns with ease, abundance, and divine flow. Speak it aloud over a glass of water and then drink it, allowing the intention to integrate into your body. Place a seed, shell, or crystal on your altar to anchor the new energy. Why does this matter for birth workers and midwives? And it's because midwifery and birth work have always been tied to the moon. Again, we understand that this time is really important. So now we get into the information around the Gullah Geechee and our story today. So we're starting with honoring the Gullah Geechee legacy, a culture of resilience, spirit, and sacred birth work. The Gullah Geechee people are the descendants of powerful, culturally rich people from West and Central Africa who were brought here forcibly to the southeast coast of the United States, and they were forced into enslavement. They primarily settled into the coastal regions of South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and North Carolina. These ancestors carry with them languages, spiritual traditions, agricultural knowledge, and healing practices that became the foundation of the Gullah Geechee culture, one of the most intact African cultural retentions in North America. With the origins and cultural roots, the Gullah Geechee people descend from nations including the Mende, Yoruba, Igbo, Fula, Mandinka, and Bankongo, among others. The isolated sea islands and coastal lands where they lived allowed them to preserve much of their African heritage, including their language, a Creole dialect deeply infused with African syntax and structure. They were able to preserve African spirituality rooted in voodoo and Orisha traditions, which have some morphed into what we know as hoodoo today. And also they were able to keep intact their healing practices such as midwifery, herbal medicine, and root work. Gullah Geechee life it was woven into the rhythm of nature. There was no way to separate it or to make it separate or different. The tides and the spirits of the land, their agricultural brilliance cultivated rice, indigo, and medicinal herbs. Their spiritual resilience birthed praise houses, ring shouts, and divination practices. And their midwives, birth workers, and healers carried the sacred traditions of African birth and wisdom into the New World, ensuring that even in captivity, the power of life remained in the hands of the people. Now, the role of Gullah Geechee midwives in the 1800s and 1900s. Midwifery among the Gullah Geechee was not just a profession, it was a spiritual call and a community role, a divine trust. Midwives known as, they called them granny midwives, but we know now that they want to be called grand, or they would just be called healers. And fortunately, some of them were called witch doctors as a derogatory term because they were so powerful. Never, these our grand midwives were so proud. I never lost a baby. I never lost a mama. And then outside of them being a portal and a keeper of the womb and of life, they were also healing the sick in their community. Powerful women, right? So people, especially folks who enslaved them, they were afraid of their power. They didn't know where it originated from. So they would call them witch doctors to try to shun them, suppress them, oppress them, confuse them, but they couldn't. So our grand midwives, they weren't only responsible for catching babies, but for guiding souls into the world, protecting mothers, and ensuring the spiritual and physical well-being of the community. The Gullah Geechee's role as a keeper of the womb, a guide of the portal, ushering life to and fro for both mother and baby as a midwife. They had herbal knowledge and ancestral medicine. And I will tell you at the end of this archive, more about my book that will be released for pre-sale today, the Black Midwife Oracle, and it's an oracle deck. And while I will go over some of the topics now of what Gullah Geechee midwives used to do, that book goes into great detail of the practices, rituals, and herbs. So don't miss out on the Black Midwife Oracle. So back to the herbal knowledge and ancestral medicine of the Gullah Geechee midwives. And I also want to say a disclaimer, I'm not a Gullah Geechee history expert, but I am a midwife from the South, from Texas, and I honor and respect this tradition and want to uplift and restore their tradition to the best of my ability. So, and then I just stepped on a plant. That was confirmation, giving thanks. Yes, thank you. Dispersing any energy around that. Yes, herbal knowledge. Using our Gullah Geechee midwives use plants, roots, and spiritual baths to prepare mothers for birth. Imagine being bathed in a rich herbal plant bath from plants grown around your home. Also, they used herbs to ease labor pains and assure a safe postpartum transition. There was spiritual protection and womb rituals. Midwives performed prayer chants and protective rites over the mother and newborn to ward off harm, evil spirits, and misfortune. There were oral traditions and sacred birth teachings, so there were birth stories and prayers and chants that were passed down through oral history, divination, and lived experience, ensuring that each midwife carried the wisdom of those before her. Divination looked like throwing the bones. So bones and items collected in nature, which are called curios, that's well known in hoodoo. These were some things that midwives would use to divine, to help to communicate with the body of the mother and the spirit of the baby to know what was needed. But also midwives used mirandelagoon, cowrie shells, to communicate this as well. Gullah midwives would have also used moon and nature-based birthing rhythms. So birth was not rushed. Midwives would follow the moon cycles, tides, and intuitive timing to support the sacred pregnancy and birthing process. Divination and prophetic birth work. Some midwives received visions or messages from spirits and ancestors regarding the unborn child's destiny, spiritual alignment, and potential challenges. There were also water, salt, and spirit offerings. Water played a central role in cleansing, protection, and blessing newborns. Babies were sometimes given a first spiritual bath with river water, salt, or herbs blessed by the midwife. Also, birth was a sacred communal event. Women gathered to support the laboring mother, singing spirituals, rubbing her back, and ensuring she was never alone. Men, too, had roles. So just in case anyone was saying, what were the men doing? They prepared healing broths, set up the birthing space, brought in firewood, made sure the fire was going, water was boiling, and that the space was well and protected. They also were responsible for keeping the birthing fire. Babies were welcomed with reverence. Their names were carefully chosen, through naming ceremonies. Whether that was a 7-day, 28-day naming ceremony, but it was a waiting period to allow the baby spirit to fully anchor into its body. And I'm excited to teach those practices of understanding the soul ties of the baby from the cosmic realm to the earthly realm. Those teachings will be a part of the birth priestess training. Outside of the naming ceremonies, the baby's placentas were buried with intention and their spirits were acknowledged as sacred. On my journey here speaking with Gullah Geechee community members, one elder said, that was just what we did. She said, nobody talked about it. It wasn't a big deal because that's just what we did. We just buried the placenta. It was a part of it. And now it has to be a movement. It has to be a thing. It has to be a name because it was removed. And with the placenta being harmed and disposed of in its way, it is harming the babies coming into the planet where their home is being disrespected and discarded and sold. That's a whole nother archive. So, babies and their spirits were acknowledged as sacred too. The midwife was the bridge between the spiritual and the physical, ensuring that birth remained a divine, protected, and community-centered rites of passage. So, what happened? The erasure and criminalization of Gullah Geechee midwives. As the 1800s turned into the 1900s, the work of these powerful midwives became a target of medicalization, colonialization, and systemic erasure. Colonial medicine and hospitalization began to sweep in, with white medical institutions beginning to force African-descended midwives out of birth work by requiring licenses, regulations, and medical oversight. There was a demonization of root work and spiritual midwifery, practices that had sustained the communities for centuries. Also considering a lot of white men and women who ran these plantations and who had enslaved these midwives and healers, they used them for healing too. They weren't going to Dr. So-and-so down the road. They was using Mrs. So-and-so who were on the plantation who knew how to work the roots. But now, when there's money to be made in birth, they then demonize this work. So, practices that had sustained the community for centuries, herbalism, divination, birth protection rituals, were now labeled as superstition or dangerous by Western medical authorities. There was legal persecution and forced outlawing. By the mid-1900s, many state and local laws were passed that made it illegal for midwives to practice without medical supervision. Grand midwives, who were known as granny midwives back then, who had at one time caught entire generations of babies, were now being arrested and forced into retirement. What are the results of that? Higher maternal and infant mortality rates as traditional midwifery was stripped away. A disconnect from ancestral knowledge as birth was placed in the hands of male doctors instead of community elders. There was a shift from sacred birth work to medicalized labor and intervention. So, in thinking of returning and restoring this culture of midwifery and birth work, we understand that what has been lost or oppressed can be restored, and the wind is picking up where I am. It's wonderful. So as I stand on this land of the Gullah Geechee with my feet planted in the earth, I know that the spirit of the Gullah Geechee midwives, healers, and way openers still speaks. Their traditions live in our bones, in our dreams, in our longing to reclaim birth as sacred. Today we honor them. Today we speak their names. We restore what was taken. So here in this moment, in this archive and lunar gathering space, it is a call to return. It is a space where we honor the Gullah Geechee midwives like Laura Carr, documenting their stories and reclaiming the birthwork that was never meant to be taken from us. Birth is ours, and birth is sacred, and birth is ancestral. Continuing with the Gullah Geechee people, we understand that their legacy is one of resistance, resilience, and deep spiritual continuity. For centuries, they have preserved their African traditions and language, food, spirituality, and birthwork. Right now, I'm standing in St. Helena Island, the heart of the Gullah Geechee community, with St. Helena Island being one of the most sacred lands in Gullah Geechee history, a place where African traditions have been preserved with unmatched resilience and spiritual power. So, standing here in one of the oldest, strongest Gullah Geechee communities, I'm honored to continue to uplift and celebrate the work that they've done. I want us to begin to talk a bit about Laura Carr. And Laura Carr was a midwife, and she was a midwife who lived in a community that was called Hobcaw Barony, and I really love her name. And I love her name, and I love the name of Hobcaw Barony, and what she did for that community, And so Laura Carr was born into slavery in 1858. And I will clarify, history says that some history accounts say 1858, some history accounts say 1868. Nonetheless, she would have died between 1935 and 1936, and she lived in what we would call Friendfield Village in Hobcaw Barony. I just had an opportunity to visit Friendfield Village for the first time after Laura Carr, her spirit and her story, after it has consistently come into my life over the years, over and over again, her story, her wisdom, her ways, and her practices. And what I know to be true about Laura Carr is that she was known as a healer in her community. She had a white 2-room cabin, right? And in this white 2-room cabin, there was newspaper made of plaster, so flour and water, that would go over the walls to help with insulation. The humble wooden door, once you open it, you would be in the main room of her house, which had a beautiful fireplace and fire hearth. That is where Laura Carr would have done her cooking. And she had 2 corners of that room where she would have had additional items like dishes and plates, and where she would have kept her herbs and things of that nature. So she would have cooked over that fire. And in the Black Midwife Oracle, we'll go into the herbs and the foods that she used to prepare. In that room, that main room would have been a sitting space to eat, and also a resting place for sleep. In that room, there is a picture hanging on the wall of Laura Carr sitting on her porch with a small child resting their head on her lap. I'll talk about that in the Black Midwife Oracle. Who was the child? Now, one thing about Laura Carr, the very few images that exist of her, she always had her head covered with a white fabric. And in hearing the historical accounts that she was a witch doctor, I had to finally clear it up with the staff at Hop Car Barony. I said, no, she was a spiritual woman called to work in between the realms. I said, what that means is that she was called as a midwife to take care of the mothers and to take care of the babies and to heal and to deliver. But she was also known as a healer in her community, as the stories that I told earlier with Gullah Geechee midwives. And with that, I said keeping her head wrapped with the white fabric would have allowed her to A, put medicine on her head to keep her spiritually aligned, and B, as she removed sicknesses and spirits and other ill-informed imbalances from people, she had to protect herself to make sure it didn't come on her. I shared that when you're a healer and a seer and a midwife, your crown is your most strongest point, and covering your head and protecting that allowed your strength to stay within and cycle through your body, but also prevent it from your crown being your weak spot where you could be hit, where spirits could come and impact you. And so we cleared that up. So Laura Carr is what you would consider a person who had mastered the elements. Around her home, she had a fence. In one of the pictures, there is a part of the fence is up and the other part isn't completed. And in another picture, she had a full fence, one side covering both sides of her cabin. And she grew herbs and she grew other crops because at that time, being enslaved, you were only afforded to certain types of foods that weren't healthy for you. So she had mastered how to work with the spirits of plants and work with the spirits of the land. There are stories that when women would come to Friendfield Village to work with Laura Carr, they would leave feeling like a spell had been put on them. And what it was is that if you being healed, you being healed. Something is being awakened within you. Yeah. So inside of Laura Carr's cabin, also right above the main area was a loft. And it was a wooden loft, a very small and tight space. And within that space is where children would have slept. And once they would have climbed to the top of that loft, there was like a little square, a cutout that would go in and close that off. And that would prevent them from falling down at night. And in the daytime, when it wasn't used, it was covered. In the second room, that would have been a room for grandparents to sleep if there were elders living in the home. And if there weren't any elders or grandparents, that would have been a room where the parents would have slept. Laura Carr's cabin is sacred and special because she was the only midwife for many, many years taking care of the people on that plantation. I can't deny that. And another thing about her cabin, I will say, when they were looking at preserving it, is that the way she did her floors in her cabin closely resembled the flooring of Yoruba people. So that tells me, and also there was a quote unquote prayer sack that was found in Laura Carr's cabin that is currently on exhibit and display. So you will have access to seeing these images and learning more about what would have been in her prayer sack and some of the sigils and other things that were found within her cabin. Those will all be in the Black Midwife Oracle. So through tracing history and the lineage of Laura Carr, with her being Gullah Geechee and the different ways that she decorated her cabin, it tells me that it is very likely that she would have descended from Yoruba people. And there are also historians that would have said the same. So that tells me that Laura Carr walks with birth priestess energy. That could be why and the wind is picking up. That could be why she walked with her head covered. That could be why she walked with the mysterious power that were able to put people into trance to induce healing. That could be why She was held in such high spiritual regard to where her cabin was preserved in honor and where her name rings through this community. Laura Carr's cabin held such a sacred and divine energy that's hard to explain. And I'm honored to be able to share more about those details in my upcoming book and oracle deck. Lastly, I visited Laura Carr's grave. I'll talk about in the book how she was buried and the beautiful, wonderful treasures that I found around her grave. I brought her flowers and I thanked her for calling in for the return of the birthing practices through modern and birth workers of today. Now, as we wrap up, we know that Laura Carr's work was more than catching babies. It was a spiritual and communal practice. It was honoring the cycles of life. Laura Carr practiced the Gullah way of birth, blending West African spiritual traditions with nature-based midwifery, and her wisdom was preserved. Well, it was erased, and now is being preserved and being reclaimed. We know that if Laura Carr truly did come through the Yoruba people, that she walks with that energy of the elemental spirits of the Ayami-Aje, of the Odu and Orisha womb spirits. When we remember midwifery in its fullness, we remember that it was never just a skill and that it was a spiritual stewardship. Now, the legacy of Laura Carr and ancestral midwives will live on in the Black Midwife Oracle, which is the first of its kind of an archival collection of the stories of Black Grand ancestral midwives across the diaspora, combined with an oracle deck, a 28-card oracle deck. That the oracle deck will come with a mini book that gives a small guide on their lives and legacy. And the oracle deck could be used for guidance and inspiration and affirmation. And the book itself, if you were to buy the book as a set with the oracle deck or separately, is a full expanded biographical archive of the story of these 28 women, not only from America, but across, again, the globe. So with this, it gives spirit and life to their living and their existence, and it reminds us that there is a way forward. Now, today at noon, CST, the website will open for pre-sale orders for the Black Midwife Oracle, which will be formally released on May 5th, the International Day of the Midwife. And then also the pathways of becoming a sacred and spiritual culture midwife. The applications will open through the Midwifery Folklorist website. The Folk Midwife Certification Pathway, which is a global universal certification pathway that's accessible for people across the globe who want to reclaim and restore and learn directly the practices of indigenous pre-colonial midwifery care. And this comes from a global perspective. The applications will open for that. And then for the Birth Priestess, which is the Folk Midwife pathway, is rooted in the patent pending Folk Midwife designation pathway. And it is an inventive framework that honors the original form of universal cultural spiritual midwifery, but it is a new way of doing so. And then the Birth Priestess pathway is a sacred protected pathway that is rooted in the African indigenous pre-colonial patent pending framework, and that is offered through a sacred protected lineage-based birth worker temple called Ile Ashe Omi Orun, the house of divine birth and sacred waters. So both of those memberships both of those application pathways will be open through becoming a member first. So you become a member, you have to read the agreement. Both of these pathways go through a private membership organization to protect it, to preserve it. and to prevent it from, being erased and co-opted again. So you will need to go to the website, review the terms and agreements to apply so that you can understand what this private membership pathway is. You will apply, and then you will hear back. You will receive information on the timeline of hearing back on whether or not your application was accepted. Classes start this autumn in September, and I will be just absolutely honored to welcome you all on this path. The oral archive will be here to continually root us in spirit and in nature, and to connect us from the primordial to the ancestral to the now, but actually being trained in these ancestral midwifery ways, like what has been taken from us. It is something that is necessary now. We don't need another blended, systemic, heavily medical midwifery training that's blended with a few sprinkled traditional midwifery practices. That's not what we need. We need what belongs to us. We need what belongs to us, which is primordial ancestral midwifery practices, and we bring that with the Folk Midwifery designation and the Birth Priestess designation, and the time is now. What has been spoken will remain. What has been restored will continue to grow. And may the wisdom of the Gullah Geechee Midwives of the Lowcountry, may the wisdom of Laura Carr, and the wisdom of all of our ancestral midwives continue to guide our hands, our spirits, and our path. We will meet again on March 25th for the new moon gathering at 4 a.m. This oral archive will be available at that time, and we will continue this great work. Thank you for a beautiful launch of the Midwifery Folklorist Oral Archive and Lunar Gathering Space. I close this archive and I close this portal in honor of the great primordial and ancestral mothers and our current powerful midwives who are rising to the occasion today. You and me and everything, all of our women in between. We give thanks.